Hey everybody, welcome to the 1947 Rise podcast, a podcast that helps India born, US trained Indians get integrated into the Indian technology ecosystem and inspires them to move back to India to build massive tech companies and or help enable the tech ecosystem. We do this by interviewing India born, US trained Indians who have moved back to India and built massive tech companies themselves and or helped enable the tech ecosystem. I'm excited to have Sandeep Patil on the 1947 Rise podcast today. Sandeep is a partner at QED Investors. QED is a premium VC in the fintech space. Sandeep heads QED's investments into Asia and focuses on India and Southeast Asia. He's a board member and advisor at Jupiter, OneCard, Refyne, Financepeer, and UpSwing. Prior to QED, Sandeep worked in US, UK, and in India. And in India, he worked at iconic companies like Flipkart and Truecaller. Sandeep, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here. Great to be here. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, Sandeep. Thanks for asking, and I'm excited to get this going. Let's start by you walking us through your journey of growing up in India, then moving to the US, and then you were in UK for a good amount of time, and then you ended up moving back to India. And then what made you move back to India? How was the move like?
Yeah. So I come from Ujjain in Madhya Pradesh. That's where I grew up. IIT Bombay, class of 2000. Um, as a 20-year-old, it was very exciting to be offered a job in the US. This was sort of 99 2000 when this was one of the dream placements, right? Dollar paying jobs, as we used to call them, were few and far between. So Capital One recruited. My other job was to work with Maruti in India on development of, oh sorry, Tata's in India to on development of Nano, and this just seemed exciting, full of opportunities. So sort of as a young 20-year-old, I went to US, Richmond, Virginia, to be specific, without realizing how boring Richmond, Virginia is. But Capital was fantastic. It's one of the best kind of first jobs anyone can have. It's fantastic training ground, both to learn about kind of problem solving, sort of analytics, but also to learn financial services from arguably one of the best financial services companies in the world. Was there for 5 years. Then I moved with Kaplan to UK. Essentially, at 5 years, you have to sort of make this decision whether you'll go for a green card and therefore sort of commit to US for the long term. And my frank point was that the US is just too boring. I was quite keen on being back in India, but couldn't quite make up my mind whether I should come all the way back. So I said I'll come halfway back. And so from US, I came to UK. We had a subsidiary here, so I was part of the three people team sent over to kind of turn it around. That went well. Did my MBA here in London Business School. Same story, like I had offers to go back to US for business school, but I chose to be in Europe because it was closer to India. Also, it seemed very exciting. Food was interesting. Travel was interesting. It was just brimming with opportunities, so as to say. Um, so ended up staying in London for 10 years. So the stopover really became a stop in some shape or form. Ended up working with Actis Capital here, which was a growth equity, private equity fund. I was looking at Africa and India at that time as part of the investment team. Then worked in with McKinsey for a number of years. At last was a junior partner in the banking and financial services practice. And coming kind of 2013, 2014, my father-in-law was diagnosed with cancer. So there was an aspect of kind of spending a lot of time in India to be closer to elders when they need you, but also kind of being there to just take care of family in general, right? It's a sort of sensitive time for us. Um, Also for me, professionally speaking, right, I started my journey working in a corporate or in a bank, right, in a line role where I had P&L responsibilities. So I was always keen to get into roles which would sort of get me back to having your skin in the game, right, for lack of a better word. I enjoyed that thrill, not just of being responsible for user behavior, for customer delight, so as to say, but also responsible for P&L. Being an advisor didn't seem like the end all be all for me, right? In that sense. So I was thinking broadly of stepping outside consulting and thinking about what would industry hold for me. So those two timelines sort of coincided, right? We spent a lot of time in Bangalore, where my father-in-law was based, but we also ended up thinking about kind of companies in India. This was sort of 2014, 2015 timeframe, right? So Flipkart has just raised $1 billion round. It is certainly the company in vogue. Everyone's talking about it. I met them a couple of times when I was in Bangalore and really fell in love with the company. The energy was brilliant. I think I was remarking to someone that I visited them during Big Billion Day, and the place came to life at like 5 p.m. in the evening, and that went on till at least 5 a.m. in the morning. Now, obviously, BBD is a legend in Bangalore, but back then it was kind of the first or second or third BBD that folks were going through. It was just brilliant to see that energy, very infectious. Um, so smitten by that, moved to India. Was with Flipkart for 3.5 years. Did various things, right? First, I ran one of the divisions, home and furniture division, on e-commerce. Then I was group head of strategy for the entire firm. This was kind of when we contributed to kind of raising $4 billion in new capital. I was involved in the Walmart discussions. Then I became head of business for the fintech division, which was sort of so it's different from phone pay, right? This is consumer lending, SME lending, other aspects of monetization. Then became the CEO and MD for Truecaller, and then joined QED, which is why which is how we are here today, right? To your question about sort of how I thought about moving to India, look, I think um, you can take the Indian out of India, but you can't get the India out of Indian, right? For
Good
most
way
of
to
us,
put
no
it.
matter how many years you have spent abroad, going back to India and kind of being part of the story is always at the back of our mind, right? So I lived in India for 15 years. I lived abroad, sorry, for 15 years. Didn't lose my accent. Still love Indian food. Loads of Indian friends. Loads of friends from here as well. But loads of Indian friends used to come to India quite regularly, every year, twice a year, kind of schedule. So always drawn to the motherland, to the land of opportunity, whichever you want to phrase it. Both ways, it was very exciting. I often used to comment and still comment to people, right? Like 8 to 10% growth rate looks fantastic on a spreadsheet. It looks even better when you're going around on roads in India every year on your annual trip and you see new malls springing up, new roads springing up, new cars coming on the roads, right? That the growth rate is just in your face, right? Because this is not a economy that is just driven by one industry. It's actually driven by multiple industries. So depending on which geography and which city you go to, the growth rate will be very apparent to you when you're going around the country. So it's always very exciting to be back home, right? And that was, in a nutshell, that was the main reason, right? Other things, sort of, why now was the family reason, which was very pressing at the moment. And where to was the Flipkart opportunity, which was very interesting and exciting at the time. But the pressing reason was always the opportunity.
Yeah. Seems like, UK offered you better Indian food, so that was the first trigger point. And then family reason, you came back. You mostly had heard about the energy and the booming years coming in the emerging markets. You saw it yourself at Flipkart, and then you just decided never to move back. And let's dive into QED. Sandeep, I think
Hmm.
just within a year, you've deployed $150 million, and you're planning to deploy another 4 to 500 million in the next 3 to 4 years. What's exciting you and QED about Indian fintech ecosystem?
Yeah, there's lots to get excited about, right? There's lots to get excited about. See, so actually, maybe it's worth talking about QED as a decision before we jump into what we are doing at QED, because we'll frame the discussion just better, right? When I was thinking of getting into venture and thinking about who to join and how to join and all that, it was important to do few things, right? One, I wanted to be with a fund that would really work to build an ecosystem. Right. So QED went into LATAM probably 7, 8 years ago, but has worked very closely into building up the grassroots ecosystem in LATAM. Right. And to me, that was at that time an inspiring story. Now, obviously, an inspiring history. But I wanted a fund like that, right? Someone who would actually invest their time into kind of getting to know the ecosystem. Obviously, Indian ecosystem is very developed. I have no qualms about that. But I wanted not to be the individual, not to be the fund who comes in when they have their allocation, comes in, does their 2 deals for the year, and then is off. Kind of thing. We wanted to go the whole hog, right? We wanted to go with the full heart, so as to say. So I think QED was interesting from that point of view. We had just raised a fund six at that time. This is 2020, which was at that time $400 million. Later we increased it to $550 million. But with that amount of capital, we felt we had the wherewithal to participate in an ecosystem as large as India in a meaningful way. Meaningful both in terms of the substantiveness, but also meaningful in the ways in which what we could inspire in the ecosystem, what we could encourage in the ecosystem. Right. We are a fintech focused VC, so we only do look at transactions in fintech. So this was sort of an important call for both at a macro reason, the overall India growth story, but also in terms of the what we saw happening in financial services and technology, right? Which are, if you will, the two feeder conduits into this particular part of the ecosystem. So from a macro perspective, I mean, everyone throws around numbers, so I won't repeat them, but India is fantastic, like in terms of growth trajectory. Just the other day, we are looking at sort of um, the projections of how economies have done. We are about a quarter way into the new century, right? So how economies have done over the last 22 years, and the story of India is just amazing, right? The traction the country has had through all the sort of shocks and disruptions that have happened in the first 22 years is amazing, right? So that part is very exciting, very interesting from a macro perspective. The direction of regulation, the direction of demographic, the quality of engineers, quality of talent, whichever you look at it, right? The overall demography is very exciting. I think the part that excited us also was the technology aspect of it and the financial services part of it. Again, the tech revolution started in India a long time ago, right? Sort of dot com, Y2K, all of that drove the services part of technology sector. But after that, the product has really taken off in a lot of different ways. And when I say taken off, it means like it's still at the sort of it has we have left the ground, but the heights are far for us to achieve, right? In terms of the companies that have come out, the quality of engineers that have come out from a technology perspective, a lot of core tech development for global leaders is happening now in India, which is always exciting. But even the Indian companies in their own right have really charted a course for themselves. So the overall tech ecosystem seems to be thriving. Simultaneously, I think on the financial services side, we have seen some fantastic development, right? If you look across peers, then RBI actually is a quite a forward-looking regulator. The circulars we have seen, actually UPI that has the platform that has come out is stellar. It's I won't say it's the first in the world, but definitely a leader in the world by far, right? And that is symptomatic of all the things that have come before it, right? How Aadhaar came in, how the bank account creation happened, what is happening with Open right now, what's happening with all the different components of the fintech ecosystem. So I think from a regulatory perspective and the sector development perspective, also we had a lot of comfort and a lot of confidence actually on how quickly fintech companies in India would pick up and would be able to innovate. Right. The other big advantage, tying it back to macro, is that once you build a kind of an innovative company in India, you have the domestic audience to scale it. But very quickly, then you can jump out of India and kind of go into Southeast Asia, go into Middle East, come to US, come to UK, right? So that growth trajectory is quite evident. Um, So I've talked a bit about everything, but I think from macro perspective, very excited about India. We're quite excited about from the tech ecosystem capabilities that existed, and then we are very excited about what financial services had to offer, both from a regulatory perspective, but from a development that we had already seen in the market. So we came into the country in 2020. If you had asked me that would we make so many investments so quickly, even I would not have tested to it, but things have turned out well. We found kind of six founders that we really like, so we have made those investments. In most of them, it has been multi-series investments where we came in into one round. So, kind of for Jupiter and for OneCard, we participated in the Series B. Really like the founders, really like the what they were building, and so led their Series C rounds. Um, Refyne, we seeded the company from day one, and so now it has gone through Series B. UpSwing and fintech and Financepeer are a bit on the earlier side of the spectrum, but are very keen to grow them and scale them as we go through. And we continue to look for many more. Right, this is certainly the beginning of a journey in India, not anywhere close to where we want to be. So yeah.
In other words, QED investors and Sandeep are at the right place at the right time. We are reaching that inflection point, and so good that QED is not a tourist investor coming in, as you touched upon, coming in, doing few deals, and moving back. You're here to in fact enable the ecosystem even further. And Sandeep, what are few variables where that really triggers you to back founders? Like, what are those variables you look at?
Yeah. So it's a bit of different recipe for different dishes, but let me try to. We obviously spend a lot of time meditating on this question. We look at our 170 odd portfolio companies and try to draw themes around it, right? The Capfin was so QED is composed of ex Capital One people, and Capfin famously is the company that sort of built out information based strategy, right? Analytics was at heart of it. We bring the same sort of rigor and depth. We try to bring the same sort of depth and rigor to venture, right? An inherently different business. But in terms of founder characteristics, right? I think there are few different things that we look for. We definitely look for people who have kind of deep sector expertise, so who know what they're talking about. Expertise don't always come by length of experience, though they often do. Length of experience matters, but I think what also matters is how intense, not in intense, uh, how specific that effort is, right? How deep are you thinking about it while you're thinking about it? So have you really understood the problem that you're trying to solve? Have you thought through the nuances of it? What do you think the solution set would be? Not a single solution, but what the solution set would be, and how that solution set get executed, right? Depending on whether you're seed or all the way to Series B or Series C, then there would be different answers and different proof points that you'll bring to the table. But that's a very important part. Like the depth of thinking and depth of understanding is very important. Many times we will try to frame our investment as a series of decisions along a decision tree, right? Where you have to make different choices on which customer proposition to pursue, which business model to pursue, which unit economics to pursue, and at different points of company's evolution, you'll make those decisions, right? So are you conscious enough to know what those choices are, how you'll turn them over? So knowing your problem statement very very deeply, and knowing everything that's around it very deeply is the first characteristic, I would say. I think the second part of it is the so getting to or knowing a solution is only one part of the problem, right? The far bigger and far more important part of it is the execution behind it, right? And that's a lot of times we try to think of execution as sheer rigor of like getting in day out and solving for it. But actually what's also important is having a thinking brain behind it, right? So not just following the discipline of execution, but being able to change the discipline over time, right? So what I mean by that is when your company is in different states, right? When things are going really well, then there are some blind spots that do appear at that time that you should be thinking consciously of and solving for, right? Over hiring, over investments, taking on too many things. All of those things happen. But at the same time, right, like the situation that's coming up, right, when things are not going so well, then there are blind spots that emerge. So it's easy to say that, oh, therefore you should be kind of cutting back on costs and thinking more about kind of extending your runway. Those are easy pieces of advice, but how do you do it? Why do you do it? What does extending the runway specifically mean in your case? Right, those are important things to think about. Even if there is a kind of hardship coming along, it's not always wise to just blindly make cuts. Right, to be thoughtful about where you apply yourself and how you apply yourself. So I think that in addition to sort of knowing the sector well, I think you as an operator and how well developed your operatorship is, I think that's the second part of it, right? And again, some individuals gain these things very quickly, others gain them later, some build over on them as they go along through their journey. But that part of it is very important. I think these two are the founder aspects. I think there are some things that we look at a company level, which then kind of tie back to what we look at founders. So for us as investors, unit economics is of paramount importance, right? Every economic activity that you do should generate value, right? You may choose to not capture that value immediately. That's a different choice, right? But the value should certainly be there, right? Growth for the sake of growth is uneconomic in our point of view, right? If you, in many cases it can be uneconomic, and that you have to be mindful of, right? So having a positive unit economics is the first thing. The second part of the puzzle then is having a model that can grow exponentially, right? Because if you combine those two, then you can create endless enterprise value, right? But if you miss one of those two tricks, then you lost the game even before it began, right? And so again, to build these, tying it back into how deeply do you think about the problem, how deeply you think about your operatorship, are are parallels, right? There are certain types of operators which will be able to fit that bill, and so those are the founders. Those are the guys you want to back. Does that answer your
Acha.
question?
Yeah. So deep domain expertise, someone who can execute unit economics, and it's scalable. If founders, if you guys have this, you have a shot at Sandeep and QED. And Sandeep, we'll switch gears here.
Hmm,
You've had a fantastic career so far. I think it's pretty diverse. Banking, private equity, focused on emerging markets, which includes Africa as well.
hmm,
Uh, and then working at iconic companies in leadership positions at Flipkart, Truecaller recently went public. And you know I think there's one sentence we can all say, we are figuring it out, right?
hmm,
Still figuring it out. And Sandeep, when things are not going in the right direction,
hmm.
what frameworks do you use to bring yourself back on track?
Yeah. Um, so uh, I'm a big fan of Daniel Kahneman, right? Who talks about thinking slow, fast and slow, and sort of a large part of that book that a lot of people don't talk about is how he frames sort of biases in thinking, right? And so framing of various questions is actually a very important part of it. So the joke someone was telling me is like, everyone asks you how do you kind of deal with things when they're not going well, and my answer to them is, when are things really going well, right? But honestly, right, with all due sincerity, jokes aside, with all due sincerity, I think 90% of the time, things not going well is how we frame them. I think that 10% of times, probably, hopefully, when things are really not going well. So let's talk about the 90 and the 10. Right, I think when you're in the 90% frame of things, it's more a matter of perspective, right? And depending on the situation, you should draw, at least I try to draw my perspective, right? So if the things are not going well and it's pressing a here and now, then you sort of have to buck yourself and get back into the groove, right? What are the immediate kind of action item is, what are immediately needs to be done on the day of, on the hour of, right? You're stuck in traffic when you're on your way to the pitch meeting, kind of shit happens, then you just kind of focus yourself on the thing and get things done. And then once you arrive at the venue, then you reframe your head so that you're in the right state of mind for the conversation. I think another spirit of things where things are not going well is when you have a bit more luxury of time, right? And my kind of the slightly controversial point of view there is that sometimes you should wallow yourself. You should let yourself wallow in your sorrows, right? You should actually enjoy the bad feeling that comes about, right? Not because it doesn't come out often, very often, but because when you observe it, it actually gives you new insights about what got you here, why you're thinking about things this way, and what can get you out of here. But much more importantly, you'll recognize the patterns in your own behavior that you tend to follow, and that exercise is far more valuable than getting out of the moment, the difficulty that you find yourself at that moment, because that learning will then kind of carry you forward. I think the thing that always gets you out of it is to to frame it in a two-sided problem, right? Whether does this really matter in 5 years, right? And if it doesn't matter in 5 years, then why do I care about it so much?
Yeah.
Right? That always gets you out. It breaks all, that whole the concept of Maya. It always breaks Maya. If you ask these two questions, you'll get out of whatever state of mind you are in. You'll reframe. You'll regain your composure. You'll regain your altitude, and then you can focus on what really matters. The second part of it is then just caring about what you really care about, right? Which is what were we driving at here when we hit this road bump and we hit the block. So those are, I think, the easier part of the problems, right? The 10% of time when things are really not going well, and hopefully 10% is exaggeration for most of us. I hope it stays at 1%, 2%, somewhere there, right? When things are really not going well, then I think that's the part when you really need to meditate on how to recover, right? And there are few different frameworks, right? There is the framework that we all kind of got used to as children. I have two young kids, so I see this often, where you just kind of need a hug and you need to feel warm and fuzzy. So whatever makes you feel warm and fuzzy is the emotional recovery mechanism. I think the second part of it is getting your head in the right spot, right? Being kind of mindful and choiceful, and that you get into by thinking about things that you've accomplished, that you have kind of the victories you already had, because it really puts things in perspective about where things can go, not just bad ways, but in good ways where things can go. That helps. I think the third part of it is getting someone who is a sounding board, right? Whether it's your mentor, whether it's your friends, your family, whoever it is for you, right? But talk to someone who can help you bounce off your ideas, because a lot of time dark times feel dark because the light is not able to reach us, right? So if you open a new hole, then new opening, then you can get light, and that kind of creates a way out. So hopefully the 2% are far less, and 90%, 98% is what we all live by. And then I think the perspective, framing things in perspective actually helps a lot.
Love it. Amazing thought process there. And Sandeep, if money and attention are not needed anymore, and
Hmm.
let's say QED is not in the picture, what would you work on?
Yeah, I think this answer to this question varies every 5 years. Okay, so I'll tell you a few last 5 years worth of answers. So if you'd asked me 10 years ago, actually 10, this is our 10th year of marriage, so this is slightly dicey. Maybe 13, 14 years ago, right before I got married and got serious about life, I would say I would have gone on like a world travel kind of thing, but more seeking adventure sports. I think that's where my heart is. In a lot of ways, I'm a licensed paragliding pilot, and I really like scuba diving, and I can't swim, but I still really like diving, and that's a story for another time. But I would have gone on that kind of not self discovery. I didn't mean to do. It's just self exploration. Right, go as deep as you can, as far as you can, and do as many sort of things that get you in a different headspace. So that would have been my answer. I think now, if you ask me, we had two kids. I have a 5-year-old and a 6-month-old. So if money and fame were not important, I would spend probably my next 5, 7, 10 years just playing with them, spending as much time as I can with them. Because not only they need me. I don't have. I think they'll be fine, right? They're fantastic. I think I need them in many ways, right? It's very joyful to be a parent, and it's great to experience that joy while you can. Certain age and stage don't come back. The spirit of discovery that they go through, I wish we all could kind of preserve it within ourselves when we grow up. So it's fantastic to witness it. It's fantastic to experience it. But I think the sincere answer, if money and fame were not needed, I would probably go back to philosophy. I think that's where my heart lies. I'm an engineer by training. Don't get me wrong. I've done lots of practical things, but there's an aspect of it which is just knowing yourself better, knowing ourselves better, which I would spend a lot of time in. So it would be like go to Himalayas and meditate to set up a. Someone asked me this question sort of 10 a few weeks back. We were having a partners get together in LA, and someone asked like, okay, so would you retire? Which was, I guess, another way of framing this. And my easy answer was, I'd buy a place in New Zealand where the time zone and the location would prevent people from reaching out to me and just be myself, sort of on a self discovery. But quite honestly, I think that's the real place, the real answer.
Yeah, love it. And Sandeep, we know you because of, investor at QED, has been an operator. What do your friends know you for? Who are you outside of work?
Who am I outside the work? Outside of work, a lot of people knew me for my adventure sports and kind of the wacky travel schedule that I used to keep for a long time. Um, these days, most of my friends know me, hopefully, for the kind of dependable, reasonable soul that they can reach out to when things are going well, when things are not going well. A dependable person for parental advice, and who'll come back to them with lots of questions about parenting advice. For that, I think I've not honestly never been a big kind of sports person per se. There was a long time ago when I used to play a lot of football, but that was very very long ago. So most of my friends usually get along and we talk about world politics and we'll talk about economy and we'll talk a little bit about cricket. We'll talk about sort of culture and sort of kind of food we enjoy and why we enjoy it, and talk about kids a lot. So those are the conversations that mostly take place.
Sandeep, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for making the time and coming on the podcast. I'm really excited for you and QED, what
Hmm.
lies ahead for you both in India, and hopefully, we get to meet in person, and I'll make sure the Indian food will be delicious.
Yeah,
And
that's always the best. That's one of the best parts. That's one of the best parts. As you also alluded, right? When I was dating my wife, she used to live in New York, and the reason why we settled on London versus New York was because the Indian food here was better. I know all the ex-New Yorkers and the current New Yorkers will hate me for that answer, but honestly, you have to come here and try. But yeah, food is always a brilliant part of things. Yeah.
love it. Thank you.
Take care, man. Bye.